Hello and welcome to our first official lesson on the introduction to the philosophy of free will. In this lesson we're going to be exploring one of the key tenets of the philosophy of free will, one of the key positions that come up quite a lot when we're talking about the philosophy of free will, and this is the position of libertarianism. What we're going to do is we're going to introduce the idea of libertarianism as a philosophical concept. We're going to explain it using some examples so we can get some learning of what libertarian means and how we can apply it to day-to-day life. And then we're going to be giving some strengths and weaknesses to the theory. We're going to analyse the theory in quite a lot of detail. So let's begin. What is libertarianism? Well, the concept of libertarianism, within the context of free will, within the kind of metaphysical ideas of whether or not we are free to decide our actions, began in Edinburgh under the philosopher Thomas Reid. So Thomas Reid was the philosopher who developed free will, the libertarian perspective of free will. Reid believed that all humans are free to do what they want so long as it is in line with nature. And you can start to develop some counterpoints if you really want to, just by reading that first sentence there. The fact that humans are free to do what they want so long as it is in line with nature. You can start to critique that already. He called this the common sense philosophy. Okay, so for example, a human is absolutely free to choose whether or not they want breakfast or what they want for breakfast, for example, because that is in line with nature. It is natural. There's nothing naturally or physically impossible about making a choice between what breakfast cereal you want, and so therefore humans are absolutely free to make that choice no matter what. But a human cannot choose whether to take, for example, a flying pig or a flying cow to work, because that would violate the laws of nature, or at least would violate the laws of nature that exist in our possible world. Okay, it could be possible that in a parallel dimension, in a parallel universe, that flying pigs and flying cows did evolve, and so therefore it might be possible to take them to work. A more apt example would be Reid would be able to decide whatever breakfast cereal they want, okay, but then he couldn't go and sit down at his desk and decide to draw a square circle, because that wouldn't make sense. That would violate the laws of nature, because a squared circle is not just impossible in this possible world, but impossible in any kind of possible world, because it's a contradiction, a logical contradiction. So these are the constraints on the libertarian perspective of free will, or at least on Reid's version of the libertarian perspective of free will. Okay, and so according to Reid as well, free will is also subject-based. This means you have an absolute freedom yourself to make decisions, and you also have the freedom to follow through with those decisions. So not only do you make the decisions, you consciously make the decision to choose how you're getting to work. Okay, you're choosing to drive to work, but you also have the conscious ability to follow through with that decision and actually go and drive to work. Let's take an example. Let's have a look at what we would call the charity example when it comes to libertarianism. According to Reid, you are free to decide that you want to support and help a charity, for example. Okay. However, also according to Reid, you may be limited by nature in how you may help. So, for example, you might just have no money. So this would be a limitation on your free will. But because free will is subject-based, it's based on the subject who is making the decisions, you are nonetheless to decide how you want to support a charity. So while you may be limited in some aspects when it comes to giving money, if you may not have enough money to give to charity, you can also have the free choice to decide how other methods you may want to support. So despite not having any money, you might decide to go and dedicate some of your time to a charity, for example, or you might give up some food and donate some food to a food bank, for example. All of these different things. And so this is a good way of understanding the common sense philosophy. So what you would do is because it is subject based, you might be limited in some aspects in your freedom to make decisions by nature or by circumstance, but you are still nonetheless free to make any decision you want in terms of how you decide to to, for example, support charity, and then you're also free to follow this through. And this is the common sense philosophy. Reid's libertarian arguments had quite a big impact in a number of areas, specifically within economics. So one of the consequences of the popularity of this philosophy was that it led to the like of Adam Smith's formulations of capitalism. So Adam Smith believed that all humans have the power to choose one commodity over another. Ultimately, economics can be seen as almost like a psychology, a way in which how people behave. And Adam Smith believed that people are free and able to choose, for example, commodity A over commodity B. And that this kind of choice led some products to being valued more than others, which is obviously a key aspect of market economics and capitalism in general. So Reid's arguments and Reid's philosophy did have quite a big impact on some of the early capitalist thinkers, people like Adam Smith and David Ricardo. It was Adam Smith who developed the idea of libertarianism, but within an economic sense. This is obviously beyond the scope for this course, but the word libertarianism can extend beyond free will and into political philosophy and the kind of philosophy of economics. But in a philosophical perspective, libertarianism is just the view that there are no restraints or controls on your actions or your decisions. When you make a decision, that decision is made by you and you alone, and you have the free will and the free enterprise to be able to follow through with that decision. So as a quick task, as a kind of interlude between these slides, now that you have an idea of what free will is within the context of libertarianism, can you think of ways in which we can criticize it? So pause this video here and have a go at maybe just jotting down some counter arguments to libertarianism. You might have already thought up of some within whilst we're going through these slides here. What are the weaknesses of libertarianism? So pause the lesson and list as many problems you can think of. And any problems, we're going to get into the problems now, but if there's any problems that I do not mention that you feel is a key criticism that you can make of libertarianism, post it down in the discussion box and we will have a discussion about it. So let's begin with the problems of libertarianism. So the first question is it really true that humans choose things purely by their own volition? So, for example, science shows us that DNA and evolution, at least in part, causes us to decide the way we do. The way in which evolution works is the creatures that have the most desirable genetic traits will survive longer and then pass those genetic traits on. And so people, for example, the idea in which people are naturally evolved to fear seeing faces, for example, in the dark. It's very easy for humans, for example, to pick out faces in things that aren't actually faces. And this comes from evolution, because we are naturally evolved to be able to see predators in the dark. So that surely impacts and influences the way in which we decide what we do. So another example of this could be humans, our decisions are at least partly made in accordance with our survival. So, for example, if I didn't need to go to sleep, I probably wouldn't ever make the decision to go to bed. I'd probably just stay up and do whatever it is that I would ever want to do. But and the same can be said for water. If humans didn't need to drink water to survive, would we really drink it at all? And this is a very important question, because some people, even if some people say no to these questions, okay, so even if I said myself that I wouldn't go to sleep if I didn't need to, and I wouldn't drink water if I didn't need water to survive, that already places a criticism on the libertarian perspective, because that shows us that our survival and our DNA and our biology, at least in part, influences the ways in which we survive. And if we were living in, 10, 20,000 years ago, where we had to hunt, and we had to gather resources to survive, then it would be it would be very convincing to argue that our decisions are motivated almost entirely by our desire to have water, to have sleep, to have food. So therefore, libertarianism cannot truly be something that we have our decisions based purely on our free choice. There at least is our evolutionary and our DNA and our biological mechanisms that require us to make certain decisions. Another question could be, doesn't society place limits on our free will? So surely we cannot be free if the law places limits on our decisions. So if there were no laws on speeding, for example, wouldn't everyone drive a bit faster? If they restricted this, they got rid of the speed limit entirely, then at least some people would decide to drive faster. So therefore, their decision to drive slower was not a decision based on their own free decision, their own free enterprise. It was a decision based on the limits placed on them by society, i.e. the law. And so these are both very good ways in which we can criticise libertarianism. You could also criticise Reid's view of libertarianism in general as being inherently contradictory, because Reid says that he is a libertarian, and he argues that we have no limits on free will, ... except for limits placed by nature. Well, then surely the second part of that sentence, the limits placed by nature, is a limit on our free will. So surely libertarianism cannot even be true at all. And so we're not completely and utterly free, like libertarian says. Oh, what are we? So if we're not completely and utterly free, how is our life determined by outside influences in any way? Well, this brings us on to the concept of determinism, which is the kind of counterclaim to the libertarian philosophy. And in the next lesson, we're going to look at the first aspect of determinism, which is the concept of soft determinism.